Right now, every AI system, including the most advanced at OpenAI, Google, and Ilya Sutskever's own SSI, is basically living its entire life on, quote, day one. It doesn't accumulate experience the way you and I do, and Ilya thinks this might be the biggest current blocker to intelligence. I agree, and I think this fact holds the key to what comes next: continual learning, individuation, and maybe even sentient AI. And I think Ilya is close to something even bigger here, that real intelligence, human level and beyond, might actually require thousands or millions of individual minds learning different things. Not one giant general brain, but a population of specialized ones. That has huge consequences if it's true. So let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am coming to you from Mexico one more time. We are actually no longer in Playa del Carmen. We're actually at the airport hotel. We have an 8 o'clock flight tomorrow morning, so obviously made sense to come back here because we have to get up at 5 anyway. So I've obviously taken the week to have a vacation, and I very much appreciated it. It's been wonderful to spend time with my brother, sister-in-law, and of course misinformation. But I watched the conversation between Ilya Sutskever and Dwarkesh Patel on Dwarkesh's channel, and I think it's exceptional. I'm actually going to do 2 videos on this topic, so definitely subscribe and stay tuned for the one on emotions. Today I want to talk about lifelong learning and individuation. It's an outgrowth of what Ilya mentions. He actually doesn't talk about this too much in this video, but he mentions it, and I want to riff on that idea because I think it's exceptionally important, and I've become more and more convinced that individuation is going to be critical to artificial general intelligence. In other words, it's going to be a collective phenomenon, not a specific phenomenon. You're going to need millions of individual brains, just like with humanity. We have 8 billion humans on the planet, and collectively we are way, way, way smarter than any individual human being is. And I believe that no matter how smart you make one of these machines, an AGI machine, even if it's got 100,000 or 1,000,000 GPUs inside of it, it doesn't matter. That will never be as intelligent as millions of individual experts on given topics. So I'm going to play a couple of clips from the video. They're relatively short clips. It's an hour and 36-minute video. It has an excellent conversation. Definitely check it out. I will leave a link in the description, but I'm just going to play a couple of them and then I'm going to riff on them like I said. So first of all, I want to talk about the jagged frontier. The jagged frontier is this weird effect of AI being really, really smart in some areas. Like it does excellently at math Olympiads and things like that, but then it hallucinates and makes mistakes on the most basic things. It's almost like what used to be termed the idiot savant. That is definitely not politically correct anymore. I don't know what the proper term is, but a person who is incredibly good at an individual topic, but not particularly good at living their lives in general. It feels a little bit like that. You have this very jaggedy frontier of the abilities of these AIs where they're exceptionally good in some areas, but not in others. And then the other piece of it is that these AIs always behave like there's their first day on the job. They behave like novices. And that's a consequence of these models not being able to learn on the job, so to speak. And this, by the way, also ties into Tesla's full self-driving. So we're going to talk about that. That's not the focus of this video today, but it is important to Tesla's full self-driving and the problems that it currently has, and so I think it's important to note that. So I'm going to begin with a clip where Ilya describes in a whimsical fashion, that's his words, not mine, why these models tend to be so jagged. They tend to be so intelligent and so stupid at the same time.
So here, this is the more kind of a whimsical explanation, is that maybe RL training makes the models a little bit too single-minded and narrowly focused, a little bit too, I don't know, unaware, even though it also makes them aware in some other ways. And because of this, they can't do basic things.
Well, 2025 is almost over, and a lot of us are doing that thing where we tell ourselves, I'll start in January. New goals, new habits, new skills. Except most people don't actually start. And meanwhile, AI ended up being one of the most in-demand skills of 2025, according to the World Economic Forum. But here's the thing, you don't need January 1st to make a new start. You've still got a month left to learn AI and walk into 2026 a more valuable, more employable version of yourself. And you can do it in just 2 days. Let me tell you about the 2-day live AI mastermind by Outskill, the world's first fully AI-focused education platform. It's happening this Saturday and Sunday, December 6th and 7th, from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time each day. And right now they're running a special holiday offer so you can get in completely free instead of the usual $395. That's right, completely free. Outskill is rated 4.9 out of 5 on Trustpilot, and this 16-hour experience has already been taken taken by over 10 million professionals across marketing, finance, engineering, and data, all mentored directly by AI experts from companies like Microsoft and NVIDIA. And here's what makes it special. This isn't a learn 10 tools kind of course. It's about rewiring the way you work. You'll learn how to use AI to simplify daily tasks, build AI agents that plan, create, and automate your workflows, design automations that connect Sheets, Notion, CRMs, etc., saving you hours every week, and walk away with ready-to-use systems for your job, business, or freelance work. Plus, Outskill doesn't stop at teaching you skills. They teach you how to monetize them. Their learners have built AI-powered side businesses that generate $4,000 to $5,000 per week. That's not a typo. And if you attend both days, you also get over $5,000 in bonuses, including the Prompt Bible, a roadmap to monetize AI, and a personalized AI toolkit builder. Honestly, this is the perfect holiday gift to yourself or to someone you know who needs a career boost going into 2026. Seats are limited, so grab your free spot using the link in the description and pinned comment. And join the WhatsApp community so you don't miss any updates before the big weekend. And now let's get back to it.
So this unawareness, and I'm going to call it uncaringness, actually tails into the emotion video that I want to talk about. So I'm definitely going to go way deeper on that in the next video. But that unawareness and I guess maybe not caringness aspect is what causes these models to be able to do so well in some domains and then at the same time so poorly in other domains, and to hallucinate and to come up with bad answers and to just generally not know what they're doing. And the problem with this is not so much day one. So let's take a human analogy here. You've got a human being that comes in on the job on day one. That person doesn't know anything about your company culture. You know, they have general training, right? They just got a high school degree or a college degree or something. So they generally know stuff, but they don't really know about your business. And so they're not particularly useful. They make dumb mistakes, things like that. That's expected. But what you expect them to do is over the first weeks and months to get better and better and better and to become better and better at that specific job and to become more and more knowledgeable about that particular area. Not to remain like it's day one. The particular type of person that we're talking about here is the person, and I'm sure you've either encountered them via, you know, some sort of interaction, like they work retail and you've encountered them, or at your company there's been a few employees like this, but you get an employee that clearly does not care. They're just like, I don't care, whatever. I'm just going to do my job, we'll do our thing, and I am not going to bother to learn how to do a better job. I'm just going to kind of do as I do. That type of employee becomes very frustrating, either for you interacting with them as a, you know, a customer service or something, or if it's in your company, even worse, because you're like, hey, I'm paying you a bunch of money to, like, you know, be good at your job and to actually care and to improve yourself. If you don't improve yourself, you're like a novice every day, and that's a very poor employee and somebody that you're probably going to want to fire. And that's kind of the feeling that we get with artificial intelligence right now, including Tesla's full self-driving. It's like, oh, you're good on day one, you're a good generic driver, but here's my city, here's my drives, here's the things that I've learned, this is the stuff that I know how, and that you're going to drive every single day back and forth, or you're going to answer the same questions every day than, you know, for a large language model or something. If you get models that just don't get better with obvious things, it's like, oh, come on, can you please just do this? You've made the same mistake every single day over and over and over again. That's when things get frustrating, and that's when we humans decide that these models are really stupid. And later in the video, Ilya touches on this. He mentioned very briefly about how models generalize far worse or dramatically worse than humans do. And I think this sort of ties back into that continual learning thing.
The thing which I think is the most fundamental is that these models somehow just generalize dramatically worse than people.
Yes.
And it's super obvious.
So then after this in the conversation, it takes a while for it to come out, but he talks about how a human being, like a kid who's 15 or 16 years old, in about 10 hours can learn how to drive a car. That's something brand new. It's not something that evolution ever taught us how to do, but we're able to generalize the knowledge that we learned over the first 15 years of our life into driving a car. Now, you're not a master driver, right? You're not like an F1 race car driver or something at that point. That would take thousands of hours, but you can drive a car pretty darn well in 10 hours. But that's because we individuals are able to update our models and update our training as we go, learning on the job type of a thing, whereas an LLM can't. The best it can possibly do right now is you give it a bunch of information about how it's doing a really bad job at something like that, put it into another training set, spend millions of dollars retraining it, and then out comes a new model. But even if that new model is 10 times smarter or something, it will never learn after that. So it's still going to be a first day on the job model. So it might be a 10 times smarter employee, employee, but it's still going to be day one employee forever. Or like full self-driving, like I was saying, Tesla's full self-driving, it comes out and it's like, wow, 14.2 is way better than 13.2.9 or whatever, but it's always going to be a first day driver in your city. It's never going to learn the nuances like you have as an individual, which becomes very frustrating to us humans. We expect things that are intelligent to continue to learn, and these models don't. And about 6 minutes into the video, Ilya also talks about if you had two students, let's say that one student decided to become a competitive programmer and spent 10,000 hours learning how to do that and became a good competitive programmer. And another student said, I want to become a good competitive programmer and spent 100 hours learning how to do that and became the equivalent level of competitive programmer. He said, which of these two people do you expect to be the better employee down the line when they got a job? You would expect the person that was able to learn in 100 hours because they were able to generalize and learn much more rapidly. And these large language models not only don't learn on the job, but they also require that 10,000 hours. They require orders of magnitude more information than we humans do in order to learn something. So both of these factors work together to make these models feel like at the same time smart and stupid. Like I was saying earlier, the jagged frontier. So as Ilya said, this shows that humans have some sort of fundamental learning algorithm that AIs don't have. We have some way of ingesting new information and learning on the job and learning very efficiently from a very few samples that AIs simply don't have at this point. So we're starting to talk here about not raw intelligence, but about the machinery for updating yourself. How do you update yourself? That's part of intelligence that's not captured in current large language models or frankly full self-driving models. And to finish up this section on continual learning, I just want to pull out this one quick quote from Ilya Sutskever, where he says that companies that work with large language models basically overshot the target. They kind of over-refined these models in the pre-training stage and forgot about the post-training stage.
The thing that happened with AGI and pre-training is that in some sense they overshot the target. Because if you think about the term AGI, you will realize, and especially in the context of pre-training, you will realize that a human being is not an AGI. Because a human being, yes, there is definitely a foundation of skills. A human being lacks a huge amount of knowledge. Instead, we rely on continual learning.
So we've established the basic idea that continual learning is important, and now I'm going to add on to that individuation, in other words, not having one giant brain, but thousands or millions or even billions of individual brains, is not just optional for artificial general intelligence, but I think it's necessary for artificial general intelligence. In other words, artificial general intelligence will be a collective thing, not an individual thing. We won't have a giant brain in a vat that is super, super smart. We're going to have many, many, many domain experts that then are able to exchange information in a highly efficient manner, much, much faster than human beings. And that will allow us to go to AGI, to artificial general intelligence, and then also to ASI, or artificial superintelligence, which is what Ilya's company is working on. So let's take our data point of one, human beings. We only have one very, very intelligent creature. Obviously, whales and dogs and cats and things like that are also intelligent to a degree, but we don't really know what's going on inside their brains, so we really have to use a data point of one. But let's use that data point of one. Humanity as a whole is clearly way, way, way more intelligent than any individual human being. There's no way that you as an individual can know everything, and I know Dr. Know-It-All, it's funny, ha ha ha. It's supposed to be a joke, folks. Anyway, it's obvious I don't know everything, but what we've got is collectively, we know with 8 billion people on the planet, plus all of the billions who lived before and wrote down their thoughts and helped us out to where we are right now, we've collectively got a massive information and a massive knowledge and a massive wisdom and intelligence that is far, far greater than any individual. And the reason this works is a consequence of the fact that every human being is individual. We have unique priors, we have unique specialized expertise, we have unique histories, in other words, the way we grew up, all of that stuff. We also have unique failures and failure modes and things like that, and all of that is critical to our collective bootstrapping of intelligence over the millennia. So when it comes to general intelligence, individuation, in my mind, is a feature, not a bug. It's not something you want to get rid of. It's something that you absolutely need to get to that point. So let's think about a couple of options here. Number one is the giant super brain that learns every domain and just knows everything. That's the current model that most of these companies have gone with, and nobody knows most because you've had to experiment and learn how to do all this stuff. But most of these models are sitting on gigantic data centers that have huge amounts of resources and are able to actually learn new things in that way. That is not very efficient, and there are serious problems with that. And I will follow up also that it depends on human researchers coming up with the right answer, the right questions to ask. Maybe that's the better way to put it. So what do I mean by that? Let's just say that there's 1,000 world-class AI programmers, engineers, and those people come up with all of the ideas that they can come up with. And you know, neural networks and transformers and convolutional neural networks, all of that kind of stuff. These are ideas that humans came up with and they implemented them and they happened to work. There were also thousands of ideas that did not. But we've only got a very small handful of different types of ideas that people have been able to even try out because the compute needs are so expensive and the consequences of failure are getting bigger and bigger. Back in the day, maybe you only needed one GPU to do something. Now you need 10,000 to be able to do something. So there's only so many different experiments, and honestly, even that humans can think up. How many different experiments can humans think up for this one super brain that's able to think about things? Option number 2 is like 10 million individuated AIs, each one learning on the job. Now, none of them are as smart as the super brain, but they're all, let's say, you know, even if they're only 10% as smart, they can learn to do things and they can act on the world, and you have millions of them. And maybe one of them, just by accident, by complete random chance, discovers something that nobody would ever have thought of. Just sort of like, you know, the world produced an Einstein, it produced a Newton, it produced a Shakespeare, it produced these individuals out of complete random chance that rose above history and created things that has increased the knowledge and collective intelligence of humanity. These people came out of random chance. They didn't come out of engineers sitting down and going like, how can we biologically create an Einstein or something? And my thinking about this is that we need that same thing. We need millions of these individuated AIs to be just doing their own thing, but they have to also be able to learn on the job. They can't just be clones of each other, then they're just photocopies, right? So it's the same thing over and over again. They all have to have individual lives, individual histories, individual ways of learning. All of that stuff has to be unique in order for these intelligences to have the chance to really rise above and collectively make us all more intelligent. So there's been a lot of talk about mixture of experts, of course, recently. I'm thinking like this is a mixture of experts to the nth degree. It's not a mixture of experts inside one model, but a mixture of agents. So maybe MOA instead. Mixture of agents across the world. Thousands or millions or billions of these things that are all operating individually and growing and changing, and yes, dying as well, because that's also important. You can't just have old things that are fairly useless taking up resources anymore, sort of like me. Right? But death is a very important thing for life and evolution to continue on. And so it's critically important these AIs have a lifespan as well. They can't live forever. So as I've been thinking more and more lately, you can't get deep intelligence without difference, without individuation, without divergent experiences, divergent specializations, divergent failures, random luck. All of that is how humans got to the intelligence level we have right now. And I believe that's the only way that AI will get there as well. So certainly continual learning is structurally necessary for AGI, but also I believe individuation is structurally necessary for AGI. But here's the advantage that these computers have. They have the advantage of speed. We have universities and libraries where we store knowledge, but it is painfully slow for us human beings to absorb that knowledge. You spend 18 years just learning the basic things before you can even go out and begin to learn the individual specializations you need. And then if you want to become a medical doctor or something, you have to go to libraries, you have to take classes from teachers. You have to do all of this stuff for at least another decade to get to become a medical doctor, or you know, a lot of other specializations as well. But these AIs, these individuated AIs, they can actually have this sort of big core super brain that acts as like a library of Alexandria and also a university. It can have these relatively monolithic brains that contain a lot of this information, and all of these individual models can dump their information into these giant libraries / universities. Those things can get bigger and bigger and bigger and contain as much knowledge as possible in a format that's both very efficient and easily transmittable. And then of course there has to be a way to give birth to new individuated AI AIs. I'm not exactly sure how that happens. Maybe it's done by choice. Maybe there's some sort of, quote, sexual reproduction that happens between these AI models. That would be interesting too. Speaking of random chance, you sort of mix up the quasi or metaphorical genes between these AI models. That gets really interesting. But if you have these super libraries that contain this information that can then spawn these little AIs that then are able to go off and live their individual lives and learn new things, that removes the monoculture and the dangers of monoculture and even alignment problems, quite honestly, and creates a situation where you have a much more robust population. And also, just by random chance and by luck, you get smarter individuals in certain areas, and those by random chance might have the history that they're able to think about something that no intelligence on Earth has ever thought about before, or in a way that nobody's ever thought about before. And these entities can then create new science, new art, new discoveries, whatever that thing is, and we all then bootstrap our intelligence up and up and up. So we may need to start thinking about AGI as a collective phenomenon that's actually both silicon-based and biologically based. It may actually depend on all of us together. And actually, in my mind, that is very optimistic. That's a much more optimistic outcome than most people are thinking about these days. And here's a fascinating thought. I remember reading Isaac Asimov when I was a child, and he was writing back in the 40s and 50s at the time, these older books that he wrote earlier in his career. And he talked about monolithic computers that actually existed underneath. Like, you take New York City and the whole underground area would be one gigantic computer. Well, as it turned out, he couldn't have been more wrong. It ended up being little tiny computers all over the place. You know, I've got one of these, I've got one of these. I'm recording something on an individual computer. The internet itself is just made out of millions and millions and millions of individual computers and some large data centers that again act as libraries. But I feel like we're in a time period right now where people feel like AGI needs to be these gigantic monolithic equivalents of what Isaac Asimov was talking about in these earlier books. These giant underground cities that Asimov was talking about have literally been converted into these giant AI data centers that suck down a huge amount of power, require tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of GPUs. That clearly evolved, to use an evolutionary term, it clearly evolved into smaller and smaller computers that were never as smart as the biggest computers, but were good enough and collectively were way, way, way smarter than just these few monolithic computers. And of course, it led to a burgeoning software industry where millions of people were able to think of ideas and come up with things that just a few researchers never would have. And yes, I'm reasoning by analogy here, but I think that's where we're heading in AI. We're going to go from these gigantic monolithic mainframe equivalents where there's just a few researchers that know what they're doing to a world where there are millions of smaller AIs that are out there and to millions of potential researchers as well. Now, those will be silicon researchers and biological researchers, but by going from a few big brains to millions of smaller brains, we're going to get to a situation where I believe we will actually have a collective artificial general intelligence and superintelligence that will be far bigger than any individual possibilities that exist with these giant brains. Alrighty, folks, that's what I've got for you today. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. And again, remember, I'm also going to talk about emotions in an upcoming video very, very soon. So let me know your thoughts about that as well, because I could maybe put that into that video. And while you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it really helps out with YouTube's algorithm, and also consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. And finally, a big thanks once again to Outskill for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to grab your free spot using the link in the description and the pinned comment, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.